Screen Profits is back to exclusively cover blockbuster movies from the last 10 years. Let's get started on the box office analysis, movie budgets, and the final numbers that determine profitability.
Welcome to Screen Profits, your definitive source for the financial analysis of modern blockbuster films. Today, we're opening the books on one of the most anticipated, and ultimately one of the most financially turbulent, films of recent years. Warner Bros. And DC Studios' The Flash. Before we begin our comprehensive movie breakdown, for everyone asking where to watch The Flash, the film completed its theatrical run and is now available for streaming exclusively on the Max platform. Now that you know where to watch this movie, let's dive into the analysis. For those who might have missed it, you can still purchase or rent The Flash on various premium video-on-demand services. But if you're looking for where to watch The Flash as part of a subscription, Max is your destination. Released on June 16, 2023, this superhero epic, helmed by director Andy Muschietti, was positioned as nothing less than a reset button for the entire DC cinematic universe. Muschietti, a director well known to Warner Bros. For delivering massive hit movies like the billion-dollar grossing horror franchise It, was seen as a safe pair of hands to guide a visually complex and narratively ambitious project. His past work demonstrated a knack for blending spectacle with genuine character-driven horror, a skill set the studio hoped would translate into a compelling superhero story. The film sees lead actor Ezra Miller reprising their role as Barry Allen, a character they had portrayed in several previous DC installments. This was meant to be their definitive solo outing, a star vehicle designed to cement The Flash as a cornerstone of the franchise moving forward. The plot summary of The Flash is a classic comic book tale of good intentions gone awry. Barry Allen, driven by the trauma of his mother's murder, uses his incredible superspeed to travel back in time to prevent the tragedy. However, this act of love fractures the timeline, creating a dangerous alternate reality where General Zod has returned to conquer a world without superheroes. To fix his mistake, Barry must team up with a younger version of himself, an older and grizzled Batman, brilliantly played by the returning fan favorite Michael Keaton, and the newly discovered Kryptonian, Supergirl, portrayed by Sasha Calle. The film's genre is a sprawling mix of sci-fi, action, and buddy comedy, placing it firmly in conversation with similar movies like Marvel's Spider-Man, No Way Home, and Fox's X-Men, Days of Future Past. The multiverse hopping and reliance on legacy characters made it one of the most trending movies of the year, with movie fans eagerly anticipating Keaton's return to the cowl after more than 30 years. The marketing campaign was centered heavily on this nostalgia. When the official trailer for The Flash dropped during the Super Bowl, it sent shockwaves through the fan community. The sight of Keaton's Batmobile and his iconic line, "Yeah, I'm Batman," was a masterstroke, instantly making it one of the most must-watch movies of the summer season for a generation of movie lovers. The hype was immense, but The Flash was also flying into a fiercely competitive summer box office. It was released just 2 weeks after the critically acclaimed and commercially massive Spider-Man, Across the Spider-Verse, and 1 week after Transformers, Rise of the Beasts. This created a crowded marketplace where it had to fight for every ticket sold. A critical factor in our later box office breakdown and production budget analysis. This movie breakdown wouldn't be complete without acknowledging the immense pressure on The Flash. It wasn't just another film. It was billed by the studio's new leadership as one of the greatest superhero films ever made and the key to unlocking the DCU's future. Getting the full movie explained requires understanding that its narrative was designed to wipe the slate clean, allowing for a soft reboot of the entire cinematic universe. This made its success not just desirable, but strategically essential for Warner Bros. But the real story of The Flash, the one we analyze here at Screen Profits, isn't just what happened on screen. It's the high-stakes financial gamble that unfolded behind the scenes. Warner Bros. Discovery placed a monumental bet on this film, greenlighting a production budget widely reported to be in the staggering range of $200 to $220 million. To put that figure in context, this level of capital expenditure places it firmly in the upper echelon of blockbuster filmmaking, rivaling the budgets of proven mega hits like Marvel's Avengers series. This wasn't just a movie. It was a massive capital investment, a key strategic play for the studio. The financing structure was a straightforward, single-studio venture. Warner Bros. Discovery funded the entire project in-house, meaning they shouldered 100% of the colossal financial risk. This is like a corporation deciding to build a new global headquarters using only its own cash reserves. The upside is you own the asset outright, but if the market collapses, the loss is entirely yours. This all-or-nothing approach directly tied the film's performance to the studio's equity stake valuation of the entire DC brand. A home run would have sent the value soaring, but a failure would publicly signal deep-seated issues with their most valuable IP. The studio's monetization strategy relied on a very aggressive global gross forecast. Internally, projections for The Flash must have been incredibly optimistic, likely targeting a worldwide box office haul in the range of $700 million to $1 billion to be considered a true success. This forecast is the bedrock upon which the entire investment was built. The primary monetization stream was, of course, the global theatrical release. For a film with a $220 million budget, plus an estimated marketing spend of another $150 million, the break-even point was likely north of $600 million. Every dollar above that would contribute to a positive ROI, return on investment. The secondary streams, including premium video on demand, streaming rights, and international sales, were seen as the gravy, not the main course. However, as the theatrical numbers faltered, the pressure on these ancillary revenues intensified dramatically. Standard profitability metrics in the industry show that a film of this scale cannot be saved by streaming. The theatrical run is where the foundational profit is made. The initial global gross forecast was not just a target, it was a necessity. A failure to meet it wouldn't just mean a financial loss on a single film. It would damage investor confidence and negatively impact the long-term equity stake valuation of the DC universe as a viable competitor to Marvel. The financial risk was not just about losing money. It was about losing momentum and strategic positioning in the brutal superhero market. Now, that massive financial risk we discussed was built on more than just a concept. It was placed squarely on the shoulders of its cast. For any tentpole film, the actors are not just artists. They are the human capital, the forward-facing assets of a nine-figure investment. Let's continue our movie breakdown by examining the key players in The Flash and the characters they brought to life. At the heart of the story is, of course, Ezra Miller, who plays both the primary Barry Allen and a younger, more chaotic alternate timeline version of himself. This dual role is central to the film's narrative. For this Character Explained segment, it's crucial to understand that the main Barry is a hero defined by trauma. He's the reluctant hero archetype, burdened by a deep-seated desire to correct a past injustice, his mother's murder, which serves as the entire film's catalyst. His journey is a poignant exploration of grief and acceptance, making him a far more complex figure than just a man who can run fast. Ezra Miller's actor filmography with DC began long before this solo outing, with appearances in Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, and more prominently in Justice League. They were positioned for years as a foundational piece of the DC extended universe. Outside of the Cape, Miller is known for powerful performances in a variety of top-rated movies and indie darlings, from the chilling We Need to Talk About Kevin to the beloved coming-of-age story, The Perks of Being a Wallflower. This demonstrated range was supposed to bring a unique depth to The Flash. However, the behind-the-scenes narrative of this film became irrevocably tangled with the actor's significant and widely publicized personal and legal troubles. This presented an unprecedented challenge for Warner Bros., creating a cloud of controversy that hung over the film's entire marketing cycle and sparked endless debate among movie fans about separating the art from the artist. The biggest piece of casting news for The Flash, and arguably its primary marketing weapon, was the monumental return of Michael Keaton as Bruce Wayne, or Batman. For an entire generation of movie lovers, Keaton's performance in Tim Burton's 1989 Batman and its sequel are not just classic movies. They are definitive. His return after over 3 decades was a seismic event designed to tap into a deep well of nostalgia. In the film, Keaton plays a grizzled, semi-retired version of the Caped Crusader, pulled back into action by Barry Allen. He embodies the grizzled mentor archetype, world-weary and cynical, yet still possessing the brilliant tactical mind and underlying heroism that made him a legend. This was a fan-favorite performance from the moment the first trailer dropped, with audiences erupting in applause at his iconic line, "You wanna get nuts? Let's get nuts." The chemistry between Miller's energetic, almost frantic Barry and Keaton's stoic, "I'm too old for this" Batman was a highlight for many critics. Looking at the best movies of cast, Keaton's filmography is legendary, including timeless movies like Beetlejuice and his Academy Award-nominated role in Birdman, a film that ironically deals with an actor trying to escape the shadow of a superhero role. Introducing a new face to the DC universe was Sasha Calle as Kara Zor-El, better known as Supergirl. Her character explained here is a radical departure from previous iterations. This isn't the bright, optimistic girl of steel from the comics. This Kara is a hardened, powerful warrior who has been imprisoned and experimented on for years. She is emotionally scarred and distrustful, a caged tiger unleashed by Barry and Batman. The behind-the-scenes story of her casting is remarkable. Director Andy Muschietti reportedly watched over 400 auditions before being captivated by Cal's blend of toughness and vulnerability. For many viewers, her raw and intense performance was one of the film's standout elements, a fresh and compelling take on a well-known character. Before The Flash, Sasha Calle was primarily known for her Emmy-nominated work on the soap opera The Young and the Restless, making this her major blockbuster debut. The casting news of her role was met with excitement, as she became the first Latina actress to portray Supergirl, a significant step forward for representation in the genre. Rounding out the principal cast is the return of another key figure from the DCEU's past, Michael Shannon as General Zod. Shannon first portrayed the Kryptonian warlord in 2013's Man of Steel, delivering a performance of terrifying intensity. His return in the alternate timeline of The Flash provided a direct narrative link to the very beginning of this cinematic universe. Zod serves as the primary antagonist, his single-minded goal of terraforming Earth to create a new Krypton posing an extinction-level threat. Michael Shannon's actor filmography is packed with powerhouse performances, earning him Oscar nominations for top-rated movies like Revolutionary Road and Nocturnal Animals. His presence lends an immediate sense of gravitas and legitimate danger to the film's conflict. This roster of lead roles and supporting cast created a fascinating mix: a controversial lead, a returning legend, a compelling newcomer, and a proven villain. This blend was, on paper, a recipe for a truly epic and rewatchable movie, making the ultimate financial outcome all the more perplexing. Now, let's pivot from the on-screen characters to the off-screen balance sheet. Because casting a film of this magnitude is a masterclass in high-stakes financial negotiation and risk management. The overall budget allocation for talent on a $220 million film can be immense, often accounting for 15–25% of the total production cost, which would mean an estimated talent pool of $30 to $55 million for The Flash. Managing these costs without sacrificing star power is where the studio's financial strategy gets really interesting, and it all revolves around one central theme: back-end participation. Think of back-end participation as giving the actors stock options instead of a massive cash salary. It lowers the studio's upfront costs and aligns the actors' financial interests with the success of the film. If the movie is a monster hit, they make a fortune. If it bombs, their payday is significantly smaller. Let's start with the lead, Ezra Miller. As the star of a potential franchise launcher, their standard upfront actor salaries would likely fall in the $8–12 million range. However, it's highly probable their deal was structured with a more moderate upfront fee, supplemented by a significant back-end participation clause tied to box office benchmarks. This is a standard practice to incentivize the lead actor. But this is also where we see the immense casting risk that Warner Bros. Was carrying. The off-screen controversies surrounding Miller created a volatile variable that could, and ultimately did, suppress the box office, thereby directly threatening the value of their own back-end participation. The studio was in a bind. They had a nine-figure asset whose public face had become a major liability, a level of casting risk almost unprecedented for a film of this scale. Now consider the monumental star power ROI play. Michael Keaton. Securing a legend like Keaton to return to an iconic role could have commanded an upfront salary of $15 million or more. However, a deal for a legacy actor like this is almost certainly built on back-end participation. It's likely Keaton agreed to a much lower upfront fee, perhaps in the $2.5 million range, in exchange for a lucrative percentage of the film's profits once it crossed certain financial thresholds. This is a brilliant financial move for both sides. The studio de-risks its upfront cost allocation, and Keaton bets on his own considerable draw. Had The Flash grossed $1 billion, his back-end participation could have netted him upwards of $20.30 million, far more than a simple salary. He became an equity partner in the film's success. For the supporting cast, the compensation packages would be more conventional. A rising star like Sasha Calle would likely have received a more standard contract in the mid to high six figures for her first blockbuster role. A veteran powerhouse like Michael Shannon might command a fee in the $1.2 million range. Their deals might include smaller performance bonuses, but the lion's share of the profit-sharing incentives was undoubtedly reserved for the leads. Ultimately, the story of The Flash's cast compensation is a textbook example of back-end participation as a tool to manage a colossal budget. But it's also a tragic financial lesson. When a film fails to perform those profit-sharing deals, the very instruments designed to create wealth become worthless, turning a potential windfall into a shared financial disappointment. That complex web of talent and compensation was the engine, but it needed a massive push to get it in front of a global audience. The official movie trailer for The Flash, dropping with teaser release moments that sparked massive fan buzz, set the stage for a premiere event rivaling any competitor's press tour excitement, while the social media campaign built theatrical release hype across the globe. The marketing for this film was an exercise in threading a very difficult needle, selling a universe-altering epic while carefully managing the controversy surrounding its lead actor. The campaign's opening salvo was a brilliantly executed Super Bowl spot. This wasn't just another movie trailer, it was a cultural event. Debuting during the most-watched television broadcast of the year, the trailer instantly generated astronomical trailer hype, racking up tens of millions of views online within hours. The masterstroke was its heavy focus on Michael Keaton's Batman, leveraging pure, unadulterated nostalgia. The shots of the Batcave, the iconic Batmobile, and Keaton's gravelly voice were precision-engineered to capture the attention of audiences who grew up with the 1989 film, creating powerful and positive fan reactions. This initial teaser release was followed by a relentless wave of marketing materials. A barrage of TV spots saturated primetime television, each one showcasing a different facet of the film: the high-octane action, the humor between the two Barrys, and the epic scale of Supergirl's power. The social media campaign was equally aggressive, deploying a stream of character posters, behind-the-scenes clips, and interactive content across platforms like Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. The strategy was clear: dominate the online conversation and build an unshakable sense of release excitement. A key part of this strategy involved early screenings for industry insiders and press, most notably at CinemaCon. The initial reactions were euphoric, with prominent figures like Tom Cruise and new DC Studios head James Gunn heaping praise on the film, calling it one of the greatest superhero movies ever made. This created a powerful echo chamber of positivity, fueling speculation that The Flash could be a genuine contender for one of the year's biggest hits. However, the press tour was conspicuously different from a typical blockbuster rollout. Due to Ezra Miller's legal issues, the actor was largely absent from the promotional circuit. Instead, the studio leaned heavily on director Andy Muschietti and co-stars Sasha Calle and Michael Keaton to carry the promotional weight. They became the public faces of the film, tirelessly doing interviews and appearances to keep the focus on the movie itself. The official premiere event in Los Angeles was Miller's first major public appearance for the film, a carefully managed event designed to generate positive headlines ahead of the worldwide release. Finally, the moment of truth arrived with the theatrical release on June 16, 2023. The Flash opened on over 4,200 screens in North America and simultaneously across most major international markets. The initial box office tracking had been strong, buoyed by the incredible trailer hype, but as the release date neared, those projections began to soften. Despite the marketing blitz, the film opened to a deeply disappointing $55 million domestically. Our box office breakdown will show that this figure was well below expectations and a troubling sign for a film with such a colossal budget. The word of mouth was mixed, and the film experienced a severe drop-off in its second weekend, effectively sealing its fate as a box office bomb. The path for this full movie explained narrative then shifted from theatrical triumph to damage control, with the studio quickly pivoting its focus toward the eventual streaming debut on the Max platform, hoping to recoup some of its losses in the home entertainment market. For many potential viewers, the conversation changed from, "When are you seeing it in theaters?" to, "I'll wait until it's streaming." But behind the hype, the trailers, and the carefully managed press tour lies a cold, hard number that defines the entire operation: the P&A budget. P&A stands for prints and advertising, and for a blockbuster like The Flash, this figure represents a second, monumental investment made on top of the production cost. Think of the production budget as the cost to build a state-of-the-art rocket ship. The P&A budget is the cost of the rocket fuel, the launch pad, and the global mission control needed to get it off the ground. For a film of this scale, the P&A budget was likely in the range of a staggering $150 million. This colossal sum was Warner Bros.' bet that they could turn their $220 million asset into a billion-dollar cultural event. The primary driver of this expense is media buying costs, the raw price of placing the trailer on television, on websites, and on social media feeds. That Super Bowl spot alone likely cost the studio upwards of $7 million for a mere 30 seconds of airtime, a perfect example of the high-stakes spending involved. A significant portion of this budget was also dedicated to targeted ad spend, using sophisticated data analytics to push digital ads directly to users who had shown interest in DC content, Michael Keaton films, or the superhero genre in general. The goal of this massive expenditure is to generate a positive marketing spend ROI. This is the ultimate metric of a campaign's success. For every dollar spent on marketing, how many dollars did it bring back to the studio? To understand this, we must first look at the theatrical revenue split. When you buy a $15 movie ticket, that money doesn't all go to the studio. On average, the movie theater keeps about 50% of the gross. So, from the $270, $6 million worldwide box office of The Flash, Warner Bros. Likely saw a return of only about $135 million. The remaining half went to the theaters themselves, which are essentially the retail outlets for the film. There are also significant distribution fees baked into the process, covering the logistical costs of delivering the movie to thousands of screens worldwide, which further eats into the studio's take. So, let's calculate the marketing spend ROI. The studio spent an estimated $150 million on marketing to generate a return of roughly $135 million from theaters. Key stat: with an estimated $150 million P&A budget and a final theatrical revenue share of roughly $135 million for the studio, the marketing spend ROI was a devastatingly negative figure, failing even to recoup the initial advertising investment. This is a catastrophic failure. The marketing campaign, despite its massive scale, actually lost money. To provide some context, compare The Flash to a wild success like Top Gun, Maverick. That film also had a massive P&A budget, but its marketing successfully translated nostalgia and spectacle into a nearly $5 billion box office, generating an incredible marketing spend ROI. On the other end, compare it to a fellow DC film like Black Adam. That film also had a huge P&A budget and underperformed with a $393 million box office, resulting in a similarly poor marketing spend ROI and a significant financial loss for the studio. The Flash followed this unfortunate precedent, but on a much more dramatic scale. The film's poor performance internationally, grossing only about $164 million, meant the international distribution ROI was also deeply in the red, especially since studios often receive a smaller percentage, around 40%, from certain overseas markets. Ultimately, the story of The Flash's distribution is a brutal lesson in modern blockbuster economics. A massive P&A budget is no guarantee of success, and when an expensive marketing campaign fails to connect with a global audience, the resulting financial fallout can be spectacular. That spectacular marketing failure wasn't just a miscalculation in a vacuum. It happened within one of the most crowded and competitive marketplaces in modern cinema. To truly understand the financial story of The Flash, we have to place it alongside its peers and rivals. Fans of Spider-Man, No Way Home's genre-defining twists, and X-Men, Days of Future Past's heart-pounding action will find The Flash bridges both worlds, delivering blockbuster storytelling moments that rival franchise-level hits, now streaming on Netflix, HBO Max, or Disney+. A deep dive into these similar movies is essential for our movie breakdown, as they provide the context for what audiences expected and, ultimately, what The Flash delivered, or failed to deliver. The most direct and unavoidable comparison for The Flash is, without a doubt, Marvel Studios and Sony's Spider-Man, No Way Home. The parallels are almost uncanny. Both films center on a young, good-hearted hero who makes a universe-altering mistake driven by a personal, emotional desire. Peter Parker, trying to make the world forget his identity to protect his friends, and Barry Allen trying to save his mother from being murdered. Both films use this mistake as a narrative device to crack open the multiverse, allowing beloved characters from previous, disconnected franchises to cross over. For No Way Home, this meant the triumphant return of Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, a moment that became one of the most celebrated in modern blockbuster history. For The Flash, the golden ticket was Michael Keaton's Batman. Both films leaned heavily on nostalgia as their primary emotional and marketing hook. So why did one become a nearly $2 billion cultural phenomenon, while the other became a historic box office disappointment? The difference, which this movie breakdown must emphasize, lies in the execution of that core concept. No Way Home is often cited by fans as a masterclass in earned fan service. The appearances of the former Spider-Men weren't just cameos, they were integral to the plot and, more importantly, to Peter Parker's emotional journey. Their interactions provided closure, mentorship, and a powerful thematic resolution. The Flash, while praised for Keaton's performance, was criticized by some viewers for feeling more like a collection of cameos rather than a fully integrated narrative. The film's controversial CGI and the much-debated digital recreations of deceased actors from past DC projects proved divisive, whereas No Way Home focused its energy on the human interactions between its living, breathing legacy cast. It's a crucial distinction that helps in getting the full movie explained from a reception standpoint. One film used nostalgia to serve its character's story, while the other sometimes felt like it was using its character's story to serve up nostalgia. As a result, No Way Home became one of the ultimate fan favorites, a film audiences saw multiple times in theaters, driving its box office into the stratosphere. Another key film in these franchise comparisons is X-Men, Days of Future Past. This film, released in 2014, was a pioneer of the legacy sequel concept in the superhero genre. It masterfully merged the original X-Men cast with the newer first-class cast using a time travel narrative. The plot saw Wolverine sent back in time to prevent an apocalyptic future, a mission that parallels Barry Allen's quest to fix his own broken timeline. Days of Future Past is still considered one of the top films in its genre because of its tight plotting, emotional weight, and an all-time classic sequence, Quicksilver's super-speed prison break. This scene became an iconic movie moment and set an incredibly high bar for depicting superspeed on screen. The Flash director Andy Muschietti attempted to create his own signature visual language for Barry's powers, particularly with the chronable, time travel sequences. While visually distinct, these scenes were often a point of contention among viewers and critics due to their uncanny, video game-like CGI. standing in stark contrast to the universally praised practical and kinetic feel of the Quicksilver scene. Beyond these thematic genre rivals, our box office breakdown must also look at the direct box office competition The Flash faced during its June 2023 release. It was an incredibly hostile environment. Just 2 weeks prior, Sony released Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which wasn't just a hit, it was a cultural juggernaut, earning rave reviews and phenomenal word of mouth. It was a visually groundbreaking, narratively complex multiverse story that audiences adored. The Flash was, therefore, the second multiverse-hopping superhero film to hit theaters in the span of 14 days, a scheduling decision that proved to be disastrous. At the same time, it was also competing with Transformers, Rise of the Beasts, another major franchise film vying for the same audience. The film was squeezed from all sides, facing an uphill battle for screens, attention, and ticket sales from the moment it opened. Pivoting to the financial battlefield, this competitive landscape directly informed Warner Bros.' internal market share projection. When you analyze the astonishing success of Spider-Man No Way Home, which grossed over $1.9 billion, you can see the blueprint the studio was likely following. Executives probably looked at that number, saw their own multiverse nostalgia play with an equally beloved legacy character in Michael Keaton's Batman, and made a market share projection that they could capture a similar, if smaller, slice of that global audience pie. The internal goal for The Flash was almost certainly not just to be profitable, but to be a dominant force, aiming to secure a market share that would translate into an $800 million to $1 billion box office gross. This optimistic market share projection was the entire justification for the film's $220 million production budget and its massive $150 million P&A spend. They weren't just trying to release a movie, they were trying to replicate a once-in-a-generation success. However, this is where a sober saturation risk assessment should have raised major red flags. This financial term refers to the danger of a market becoming overcrowded with similar products, thus diluting the potential earnings for all competitors. The studio's saturation risk assessment for The Flash appears to have been fatally flawed. They failed to account for the multiverse fatigue that was beginning to set in with audiences, and more critically, they completely underestimated the impact of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Releasing their film just 2 weeks after a universally acclaimed, visually stunning competitor in the exact same subgenre was a strategic blunder of epic proportions. Key stat: the superhero multiverse subgenre, which in 2021 was dominated by a single film, became a fiercely contested space in June 2023, with 2 major blockbusters cannibalizing the same audience and driving the saturation risk to an unsustainable level. This leads to a brutal budget versus performance comparison. Spider-Man No Way Home set one of the highest ROI benchmarks in modern cinema, turning its $200 million budget into nearly a 10x return. Even X-Men, Days of Future Past, produced on a similar $200 million budget, generated around $746 million worldwide, an impressive 3.7x return. Typically, the ROI average for a successful comic book blockbuster is expected to fall within the 3x-5x range based on production cost alone. The Flash, however, with its $220 million budget and a disappointing $270 million global gross, didn't just miss that benchmark, it crashed and burned, failing to even recoup its production costs, let alone its massive marketing spend. A proper saturation risk assessment would have warned that the optimistic market share projection was untenable in such a crowded market. But the studio pushed ahead, leading to one of the biggest financial losses in recent Hollywood history. That brutal budget versus performance analysis shows just how much the film's competitive positioning impacted its bottom line. But a film's success isn't just about its release window, it's about the core product itself, the story. To understand why audiences didn't connect with The Flash on the same level as its multiverse rivals, we need to go deeper than the balance sheets and conduct a full narrative and visual breakdown of the film. This is where we get into the nuts and bolts of the story, the characters, and the spectacle that Warner Bros. Bet hundreds of millions of dollars on. Let's begin the flash plot summary and story breakdown. The film opens not with Barry Allen, but with Bruce Wayne, Ben Affleck's version, in a high-speed chase through the streets of Gotham. This immediately establishes the film's visual style, fast-paced, CGI-heavy, and deeply integrated into the established DCEU. The cinematography here is slick and modern, full of dynamic camera movements that follow the Batcycle. Barry Allen, working his day job as a forensic scientist for the Central City Police Department, gets a call from Alfred. There's a crisis at Gotham General Hospital. A high-tech heist has gone wrong, the building is collapsing, and an entire maternity ward full of newborn babies is plunging from the sky. This opening set piece is designed to be one of the film's big, memorable scenes, showcasing Barry's powers in a unique way. As he races to the scene, he burns an immense number of calories and has to comically refuel by stealing food from a vending machine and a hot dog cart. This sequence, a major focus of the film's visual effects, became one of its most talked about and controversial moments. The CGI breakdown here is crucial. The babies are rendered in a way that many viewers found unsettling and cartoonish, falling into the uncanny valley. This was the audience's first major exposure to the film's specific visual language, and for many, it was an immediate red flag. This scene, meant to be a fun, action-packed introduction, ended up sparking a debate about the quality of the film's CGI that would follow it through its entire release. In this full movie explained analysis, it's important to note that this scene establishes Barry's core character trait. He is a hero who is constantly trying to do too much, too fast, and is often just barely holding things together. After successfully saving the babies and a falling therapy dog, Barry returns to his lab and we dive into the core emotional conflict of the screenplay analysis. He visits his father, Henry Allen, in prison. Henry is wrongfully incarcerated for the murder of Barry's mother, Nora Allen. This tragic event is the defining trauma of Barry's life. He has dedicated his career to finding the piece of evidence that will exonerate his father, but time is running out. This narrative breakdown reveals a deeply personal motivation. The genre might be superhero action, but the movie themes are rooted in grief, loss, and the desperate desire to rewrite the past. Later that night, grieving outside his childhood home, Barry runs. He runs so fast that he pushes past the speed of light and enters what he later calls the Chronobowl, a spherical arena of time where he can witness moments from the past. He sees a way to go back to the day of his mother's death and make one tiny change. Ensure his father remembers to buy a can of tomatoes, a simple act that would create an alibi. Bruce Wayne warns him against it, explaining that changing the past, even with the best intentions, can have catastrophic and unforeseen consequences, creating temporal paradoxes that could destroy everything. This conversation is a classic mentor's warning trope, setting up the central conflict and stakes. Ignoring Bruce's advice, Barry travels back through the Chronobowl. The visual style of this sequence is one of the film's most distinct elements. It's a massive CGI environment where past events are projected like statues on the inside of a sphere. As Barry runs, he witnesses key moments from the DCEU's history. It's a visually ambitious idea, but again, the execution of the CGI was a major point of discussion for critics and fans. As Barry makes the change and attempts to return to his own time, he's knocked out of the Speed Force by another mysterious speedster clad in dark, jagged armor. He crash lands in the year 2013, but it's a 2013 that has been subtly and dangerously altered. He arrives on the day he originally got his powers, finding his younger, 18-year-old self an obnoxious, carefree college kid who hasn't yet been tempered by tragedy. This is where our story breakdown shifts into a buddy comedy. The two Barrys have an immediate, chaotic chemistry. The older, wiser Barry must now figure out how to get his powers back while babysitting his immature doppelganger. Their first stop is Wayne Manor, but when they arrive, they don't find Ben Affleck's brooding billionaire. This is one of the film's most iconic scenes explained. Instead, they find a long-haired, grizzled, and retired Bruce Wayne, played by Michael Keaton. The filming locations here are key. This Wayne Manor is a direct callback to the Gothic design of the 1989 Tim Burton film, a stark contrast to the modern glass house of Affleck's Batman. Keaton's Bruce is a recluse, having cleaned up Gotham years ago and hung up the cowl. He's a man haunted by his past, living alone in a dusty mansion. The two Barrys try to convince him to help them, and this leads to a fantastic bit of screenplay analysis. Keaton's Batman uses a handful of dried pasta on his kitchen counter to deliver a perfect, simple explanation of multiverse theory, the spaghetti explanation. It's a brilliant, character-driven piece of exposition that grounds the film's high-concept sci-fi in a tangible, easy-to-understand analogy. It's a fan-favorite moment and a masterclass in how to handle complex narrative ideas simply. He initially refuses to help, but after seeing the Barrys' determination and being reminded of his own mission, he agrees to help them recreate the accident that gave Barry his powers. The subsequent scene in the Batcave is pure fan service, revealing the classic Batmobile and the 1989 Batsuit, all while Danny Elfman's iconic score swells in the background. The attempt to recreate the lightning strike fails to give the original Barry his powers back and instead gives them to the younger Barry. It's a classic, hoisted by his own petard moment. At that exact moment, a global broadcast interrupts. General Zod, the Kryptonian villain from Man of Steel, has arrived, delivering the same ultimatum he did in that film. But in this timeline, there is no Superman to stop him. This is the moment the older Barry realizes the true horror of his mistake. He didn't just save his mom, he created a world without its greatest protector, dooming it to extinction. This narrative breakdown shows the stakes escalating from personal to global. Their only hope is to find this timeline's Kryptonian. Using the Batcomputer, they track the Kryptonian pod not to Kansas, but to a secret military prison in Siberia. Batman, now back in action, unveils the Batwing and the trio fly off to the rescue. The ensuing sequence is another major action set piece, full of impressive visual effects as they break into the high-security facility. Inside, they don't find Kal-El, but his cousin, Kara Zor-El, a.k.a. Supergirl, played by Sasha Calle. She has been held captive and experimented on for years, left weak and distrustful. After a brutal fight, they manage to free her and escape. Flying out into the sun for the first time in years, Kara's powers are restored, and she becomes a formidable, rage-fueled ally. It is only after this escape that the older Barry is finally able to regain his powers, struck by lightning in a desperate second attempt. Now, the team is assembled. 2 Flashes, 1 Batman, and a Supergirl, ready to take on Zod's invading army. This leads us to the film's massive third-act battle, a sprawling conflict in a desolate desert landscape. This is a clear homage to the final battle in Man of Steel, but with a new lineup of heroes. The visual style is epic, with massive Kryptonian ships, world-engine terraformers, and explosive superhero combat. The CGI breakdown here would be extensive. It's a relentless sequence of high-speed action and destruction. Supergirl takes on Zod in a brutal aerial dogfight, while Batman uses the Batwing to take down the Kryptonian ground forces. The 2 Flashes use their combined speed to evacuate soldiers and take on Zod's lieutenants. It's during this battle that the full consequences of Barry's actions become heartbreakingly clear. They are losing. Batman is gravely injured and ultimately killed. Supergirl, in a fit of rage, is impaled by Zod. Seeing this devastation, the younger Barry, who now has a taste of being a hero, refuses to accept defeat. He realizes he can run fast enough to briefly turn back time, just a few seconds or minutes, to try and change the outcome of the battle. This sets up the central dilemma of the film's climax, leaving us with several critical questions that need to be answered in our ending explained segment. Can you truly save everyone? What is the cost of refusing to let go? And how does Barry Allen finally fix the mistake that started this whole mess? From an investor's perspective, analyzing the story and visuals of The Flash is all about evaluating the project's foundational risk-return ratio. A studio doesn't just greenlight a script. It greenlights a complex financial instrument, and every creative choice carries a dollar amount and a corresponding risk. The initial investment in the narrative began with the script development cost. For a typical film, this might be a few $100,000. However, The Flash languished in development hell for nearly a decade, cycling through multiple writers and directors. This prolonged development dramatically inflates the script acquisition cost and development expenses, likely pushing the total investment into the millions before a single frame was ever shot. This upfront, sunk cost immediately worsened the project's initial risk-return ratio. The studio was already in a deep financial hole, increasing the pressure on the final film to be a massive commercial success just to break even on its long and troubled development journey. The core premise of the story itself carried an enormous creative risk. The decision to build a universe-resetting epic around a lead actor facing significant public controversy was a gamble of unprecedented scale. Furthermore, the narrative relied heavily on two high-wire acts: the multiverse concept, which risked audience fatigue, and nostalgia for a 30-year-old version of Batman, which might not resonate with younger demographics. The potential return was astronomical, a chance to replicate the billion-dollar success of Spider-Man: No Way Home. But the risk was equally immense. If the story didn't perfectly balance its complex parts, or if external factors suppressed audience interest, the entire $370+ million investment could collapse. This precarious balance defined the film's incredibly volatile risk-return ratio from its very conception. Visually, The Flash was an incredibly ambitious and therefore expensive undertaking, with a massive portion of its capital allocated to visual effects. We can estimate that the VFX budget consumed at least 40% of the total $220 million production cost, placing it in the range of $88 to $100 million. For a film with a 144-minute runtime, this translates to a staggering CGI cost per minute of over $600,000. This level of production spending is reserved for the most visually complex blockbusters. The crucial metric here becomes the ROI versus visual complexity. A studio invests this much capital with the expectation that the spectacle will be a primary box office driver. However, the widely publicized and often negative reception of The Flash's CGI represents a catastrophic failure of this investment. The studio did not achieve budget efficiency. Instead, they ended up with a high post-production burn rate that produced visuals many found unconvincing. This poor return on the visual effects investment is a key factor in the film's overall negative risk-return ratio. The money was spent, but the perceived value wasn't delivered on screen, failing to provide the must-see spectacle needed to drive ticket sales and justify the enormous cost. Ultimately, the financial story of The Flash's narrative and visuals is one of high risk and devastatingly low return. A case study in how even a massive capital investment in story and spectacle can fail if the execution doesn't connect with a global audience. That detailed story breakdown leaves us on the edge of the film's chaotic, time-bending climax. But before we get to the ending, let's address some of the biggest questions and fan theories that emerged from the film's complex narrative. This is an essential part of our full movie explained analysis, tackling the queries that dominated online discussions and Reddit threads. These are the details that keep viewers thinking long after the credits roll. A major question that dominated fan discussions was, who was the dark, mysterious speedster who kicked Barry out of the Chronobowl? This character, referred to by fans and in some behind-the-scenes material as the Dark Flash, is a pivotal figure in the film's climax, and there are several fan theories about his identity. The most prominent and ultimately correct theory, which the film later confirms, is that the Dark Flash is an older, corrupted version of the younger, 2013 Barry Allen. In this movie breakdown, we must look at the evidence. When the Dark Flash first appears, his movements and powers mirror Barry's own, and his suit appears to be a twisted, broken-down version of the Flash suit. The crucial clue is his motivation. He is trapped in a causal loop, constantly trying to fix the timeline by killing the younger Barry to prevent him from making the initial mistake. This tragic villain is the living embodiment of the film's central theme, the destructive nature of refusing to accept loss. For this spoiler-filled analysis, the Dark Flash isn't just a physical threat. He represents the grim future that awaits Barry if he continues down this path of temporal manipulation. Another highly searched query is, why did Michael Keaton's Batman have long hair and live as a recluse? This character choice was a brilliant way to visually and narratively communicate the passage of time and the toll of a long career as a crime fighter. Our full movie-explained analysis of this character shows that this isn't the same Batman we left in 1992's Batman Returns. Decades have passed. In this altered timeline, Bruce Wayne succeeded. He cleaned up Gotham's streets so effectively that there was no longer a need for Batman. This success, however, left him without a purpose. The long hair, the unkempt mansion, the spaghetti on the counter, it all paints a picture of a man who won the war but lost himself in the peace that followed. He's a man adrift, haunted by the past, but with no clear future. This is a common trope for the retired hero archetype, seen in similar movies like Logan. It provides a compelling starting point for his character arc, making his decision to put the cowl back on and help the Barrys feel earned and impactful. It's not just a nostalgic cameo. It's a fully realized character journey from cynicism back to heroism. Finally, many viewers were left asking, how is General Zod back, and why does his invasion play out differently? This is a key point in our movie breakdown and gets to the heart of the film's time travel mechanics. Barry's decision to save his mother created what's known as a nexus event, a single change that creates massive ripple effects throughout the timeline. In this new reality, the chain of events that led to Superman's arrival on Earth was altered. The Kryptonian pod carrying Kal-El was likely diverted or never found by the Kents. As a result, when Zod arrives in 2013, Earth has no Superman to defend it. The invasion itself plays out in a similar fashion because Zod's motivations and resources are the same. He is still the ruthless military leader on a mission to create a new Krypton, regardless of the cost to humanity. The different outcome, humanity's utter defeat, is a direct consequence of Barry removing the world's most powerful hero from the equation. This reinforces Bruce Wayne's earlier warning. Even the smallest change to the past can have devastating and unpredictable consequences. But what if all these fan theories and unanswered questions aren't just for fun? From a financial perspective, they are a deliberate and powerful tool for driving a key metric: fan engagement. So, while fans debate the identity of the Dark Flash or the specifics of the timeline, the studio is quietly tracking the online chatter. Every Reddit thread, every YouTube comment, every what-if video is a form of free, organic marketing that boosts engagement-driven revenue and extends the film's relevance long after it leaves theaters. This deliberate ambiguity isn't just a storytelling choice, it's a financial strategy. It's a calculated creative risk designed to maximize the long-term IP lifecycle value by ensuring the audience never stops talking, theorizing, and most importantly, staying invested in the brand. That detailed analysis of the film's most searched questions sets the stage perfectly for our grand finale, the part of our breakdown that everyone has been waiting for. We've examined the production, the cast, the marketing, and the story. Now, we must dive headfirst into the film's climactic, reality-shattering conclusion. This is the definitive The Flash ending explained. Be warned, from this point forward, we are in full The Flash spoilers territory. If you have not seen the movie, this is your final chance to turn back. For everyone else, let's break down that wild twist ending, the shocking post-credit scene, and what it all means for the future of the DC universe. Our The Flash ending explained begins in the fiery chaos of the desert battle against General Zod. Supergirl is dead. Batman is dead. Victory is impossible. The younger Barry, refusing to accept this grim reality, begins running back in time repeatedly, trying to change the outcome. The primary, older Barry watches in horror as his younger self tries and fails, again and again, creating a feedback loop of death and destruction. With each attempt, the timeline becomes more unstable, and we see other universes, other timelines, colliding with theirs. This is where the film delivers its most discussed and controversial cameos, showing Nicolas Cage as Superman, Christopher Reeve's Superman, and Adam West's Batman as their worlds crumble. Suddenly, the Dark Flash, the mysterious speedster from before, attacks. It is here that he is unmasked, revealing himself to be a much older, scarred version of the younger Barry. He is the living consequence of refusing to let go. A man who has spent decades trying to fix the timeline and save Batman and Supergirl, only to become a monster trapped in a paradox. He tries to kill the younger Barry to break the loop. But in a moment of heroic sacrifice, the younger Barry allows himself to be killed by the Dark Flash, which simultaneously erases the Dark Flash from existence. This is the emotional core of the Flash ending explained. The primary Barry finally understands the lesson he has been avoiding this entire film. He cannot fix the past. Some things are meant to happen. He must accept the loss of his mother. With this realization, he travels back one last time, not to save her, but to let her go. He returns to the supermarket on the day of her death, but instead of stopping the murder, he simply has one last, unseen moment with her. He then undoes the fix he made earlier with the can of tomatoes. However, in a final act of love for his father, he makes one tiny, seemingly insignificant change. He moves the can of tomatoes his mother was looking for from the bottom shelf to the top shelf. His logic is that this will ensure that when the police review the security footage from that day, they will have a clear shot of his father's face, proving he wasn't at home at the time of the murder. It seems like a perfect, harmless solution. He has accepted his mother's fate, but still found a way to save his father. This is where the real twist ending kicks in, a final shocking turn that redefines the entire film. Barry returns to his present, and everything seems perfect. The new evidence from the security camera has exonerated his father, who is now a free man. Barry is on the phone with Bruce Wayne, telling him the good news. As his father walks down the courthouse steps, a familiar black car pulls up. But when the man steps out, it's not Ben Affleck. It's George Clooney, who famously portrayed Batman in the 1997 film Batman and Robin. Barry stares in utter shock and confusion. The final line of the film is Barry, bewildered, realizing his tiny change had another massive, unforeseen consequence. He has changed the very face of Batman. This is the ultimate punchline to the film's theme of unintended consequences. For anyone seeking the full The Flash ending explained, this is the key takeaway. Barry did not return to his own timeline. By making that second, small change, he overshot his mark and landed in yet another alternate universe, one that is close to his own but crucially different. This shocking conclusion immediately sparked a wave of the Flash fan theories. The most popular theory was that this Clooneyverse was intended to be the new official timeline for James Gunn and Peter Safran's rebooted DC universe. This theory suggests that the ending was a deliberate narrative device to wipe the slate clean, removing the Snyderverse actors and allowing for a fresh start. This would have been a bold move, positioning the Flash as the literal bridge between the old DCU and the new one, a key component of the planned universe expansion. However, this theory has been largely debunked by the film's box office failure and subsequent announcements from DC Studios, which have confirmed a full, hard reboot is coming instead. The George Clooney cameo, therefore, feels less like a setup for future sequels and more like a final, meta-joke about the chaotic, ever-changing nature of the DC film franchises. Another one of the most compelling The Flash fan theories is that Barry is now permanently lost in the multiverse. He is a temporal refugee, unable to get back to his original home. According to this theory, any potential sequels would have followed Barry as he tried to navigate this new world and find his way back to the timeline with Ben Affleck's Batman and his version of the Justice League. This opens up endless possibilities for rumored plotlines, with Barry potentially encountering different versions of iconic heroes and villains in each new universe he visits. It transforms the character from a simple superhero into a multiversal explorer, a concept that could have sustained a whole new trilogy. This reading of the twist ending is thematically resonant, suggesting that Barry's punishment for meddling with time is a permanent exile from everything he knows and loves. A full The Flash spoilers discussion must acknowledge that this is a much darker and more tragic interpretation of the film's final moments. Of course, no breakdown would be complete without analyzing the post-credit scene. In this final tag, we see Barry with this new universe's version of Aquaman, played once again by Jason Momoa. They are stumbling out of a bar, with Barry explaining his multiversal predicament to a very drunk Arthur Curry. Aquaman doesn't seem to grasp the full implications, instead focusing on the fact that different universes might have different kinds of beer. He then collapses face first into a puddle and gives Barry his Atlantean ring, telling him to use it to buy more beer before passing out. This post-credit scene is played purely for laughs and seems to deliberately deflate any sense of a grand, interconnected plan. It suggests that while Batman has changed, some figures, like Aquaman, might be universal constants. Or, more likely, it was simply a fun, comedic scene with no deeper meaning for the planned universe expansion. It does very little to set up any serious rumored plotlines and mostly serves to end the film on a lighthearted, if somewhat anticlimactic, note. For those looking for the ultimate The Flash ending explained, the conclusion is this. Barry Allen saved his father but lost his entire universe in the process, and the future of his story, and the DC universe itself, was left more uncertain than ever before. From a purely financial standpoint, the creative choices made in a film's final act are not just about storytelling. They are about securing future revenue streams. The ending of The Flash was clearly designed to set up a new status quo, and based on that design, we can assign it a sequel potential score. On paper, the twist ending that introduces a new universe with a new Batman would give the film a high sequel potential score. It creates a brand new sandbox for creators to play in, full of narrative possibilities that could easily fuel a trilogy. This kind of open-ended conclusion is a textbook strategy to increase the long-term IP lifecycle value of a property. A successful launch could have increased the total franchise IP worth by an estimated $1 to $2 billion over the next decade, factoring in sequels, spin-offs, and merchandise. However, this score exists in a vacuum. In the harsh reality of the market, the film's catastrophic box office performance instantly downgraded its actual sequel potential score to effectively 0. The audience rejected the product, making any discussion of a direct sequel a financial non-starter. This catastrophic failure completely derailed the potential franchise roadmap that the ending was built to launch. The roadmap likely involved a sequel where Barry, stranded in the Clooneyverse, would have to team up with this new Batman and potentially other new heroes to find his way home. This would have provided a perfect avenue for content monetization, allowing the studio to recast key roles under the guise of a multiversal story. Every new film in this roadmap would have been another nine-figure bet, but one built on a foundation that had already crumbled. The ending's massive creative risk relying on a cameo from a widely panned 25-year-old movie was a bold swing that offered a potentially high reward. But because the film failed to connect, the risk yielded no return, turning the cameo from a brilliant cliffhanger into an expensive, dead-end joke. This brutally illustrates how a film's ending can be a powerful tool for building IP valuation, but only if the film itself is successful. Ultimately, the financial lesson of The Flash's conclusion is a stark one. The filmmakers constructed a narrative launchpad for a decade of new content monetization, but they failed to build a rocket ship that the audience wanted to board. The risk-return ratio of a sequel is now infinitely high. Any studio executive looking at the data would conclude that investing another $200+ million in a sequel to a film that may have lost the company over $150 million would be a gross dereliction of fiduciary duty. The ending, therefore, did not increase the franchise IP worth. It actively damaged it by creating a public, high-profile dead end. It transformed the DC brand from a state of creative flux into a state of financial distress. The final franchise equity valuation of this particular iteration of the DC universe was effectively written down to 0 the moment The Flash's second weekend box office numbers came in. It's a powerful reminder that in the world of blockbuster cinema, a clever ending can't save a flawed financial foundation. The story of The Flash may have ended with a new universe, but its financial story ended right there, a definitive and costly conclusion. That definitive, if financially disappointing, conclusion to The Flash's story has a direct and powerful impact on what is normally a cash cow for any major blockbuster: the world of merchandise and fan culture. A film's success isn't just measured in ticket sales. It's also measured in t-shirts, action figures, and the organic buzz that keeps a brand alive. Let's continue our movie breakdown by examining the ecosystem of official merchandise and fan engagement that was built around The Flash, a machine designed to generate hundreds of millions in ancillary revenue. On paper, The Flash was a merchandiser's dream. The film was packed with visually distinct characters and vehicles, perfect for a line of movie collectibles. The primary driver of the merchandise hype was, unsurprisingly, the return of Michael Keaton's Batman. Toy companies like McFarlane Toys and Funko went all in, producing a massive wave of official merchandise. You had highly detailed 7-inch action figures of Keaton's Batman, the new Supergirl, both versions of the Flash, and of course, the iconic 1989 Batmobile and the new Batwing. These weren't just toys. They were collector-grade items aimed at an adult audience with disposable income, the very fans who grew up with the original film. The behind-the-scenes design process for these collectibles is fascinating, as sculptors and designers worked directly from concept art and digital models from the film to ensure screen accuracy, a key selling point for serious collectors. Beyond the high-end movie collectibles, there was a broad push for themed apparel and other items. We saw everything from t-shirts featuring the classic Flash logo to more subtle designs incorporating Keaton's iconic yellow and black bat symbol. The strategy was to appeal to every segment of the market, from kids wanting a simple action figure to adults looking for a premium statue for their display case. The initial wave of official merchandise was significant, with major retailers like Target and Walmart dedicating considerable shelf space in anticipation of a summer blockbuster. The hype was real, but it was also incredibly fragile, built entirely on the assumption that the movie would be a hit. This is where fan engagement comes in. A successful film creates a powerful, self-sustaining ecosystem of fan activity. We see massive waves of fan art flooding social media, intricate cosplay at fan conventions, and viral trends or TikTok challenges that keep the film in the cultural conversation. Warner Bros. Attempted to kickstart this with its own social media campaigns, encouraging fans to share their excitement. However, the film's divisive reception and rapid box office decline had a chilling effect on this organic engagement. While there was certainly some beautiful fan art and impressive cosplay, especially for Sasha Calle's Supergirl, it never reached the critical mass you'd see for a true cultural phenomenon like Spider-Man, Across the Spider-Verse, or Barbie. The fan conversation quickly shifted from celebrating the movie to debating its flaws and analyzing its box office failure, which is not the kind of fan engagement that drives merchandise sales. The pop culture impact was a flash in the pan rather than a sustained cultural moment. Now, let's pivot from the products on the shelf to the numbers on the balance sheet. For a major studio, merchandise isn't just a fun extra. It's a core component of a film's overall profitability, and it all revolves around one key concept: licensed product royalty. Here's how it works. Warner Bros. Doesn't actually manufacture the toys or print the t-shirts. Instead, they act like a landlord, licensing the rights to their characters, their intellectual property, to companies like McFarlane Toys or Funko. For this privilege, the toy company pays the studio a licensed product royalty on every single item sold. Think of it as the studio getting a commission on every toy. This royalty rate typically falls between 8% to 15% of the wholesale price. So, for a potential blockbuster like The Flash, the projected sales for branded toy revenue were likely forecasted in the hundreds of millions of dollars, which would have generated tens of millions in pure, high-margin profit for the studio through this licensed product royalty stream. This entire financial model is powered by what we call fan-driven ROI. The beauty of a hit movie is that it creates an army of passionate consumers for free. The millions spent on the P&A budget don't just sell movie tickets. They create an emotional connection that drives fans to retail stores. This organic excitement is what generates a positive fan-driven ROI. When fans are passionately engaged, they buy merchandise, post about it online, and create a feedback loop of free marketing that drives even more sales. For a film like Marvel's The Avengers, the fan-driven ROI is astronomical, leading to billions in merchandise sales over the years. For The Flash, this engine stalled. The weak box office performance meant the emotional connection wasn't strong enough to drive mass-market sales. The crucial retail partnerships with stores like Walmart and Target are a double-edged sword. While they offer massive distribution, they are also ruthless with their inventory. When the movie flopped, those retailers quickly slashed prices and moved the product to clearance aisles to make way for the next big thing, resulting in a disastrously low merchandise ROI. The projected high-margin income from the licensed product royalty stream evaporated, turning another potentially lucrative revenue source into a financial write-off. That stalled merchandise engine is a direct consequence of a film's public reception, which brings us to our next critical area of analysis: the court of public opinion. The journey from festival hype to the final Rotten Tomatoes score can make or break a film's legacy and its long-term value. From Oscars nominations for its outstanding performances to Golden Globe wins that sparked massive awards buzz, The Flash's critical acclaim rivals any competitor's film festival highlights, earning a stellar Rotten Tomatoes score and glowing audience ratings across all streaming platforms. That at least was the narrative the studio hoped for, and for a brief, shining moment, it seemed possible. The initial wave of awards buzz for The Flash was, in fact, incredibly strong. The film was screened early for industry insiders at CinemaCon, and the reactions were nothing short of euphoric. High-profile figures like Tom Cruise reportedly loved the film, and new DC Studios co-head James Gunn publicly called it one of the greatest superhero films ever made. This generated a powerful, positive narrative months before release, leading many to believe that The Flash could be a genuine contender, not just at the box office, but perhaps even for technical awards or nominations. However, this early hype proved to be a fragile bubble, one that burst the moment the wider wave of critic reviews began to pour in. The final Rotten Tomatoes score for The Flash tells the entire story of its divided reception. The film landed at a 63% on the tomatometer, earning it a rotten rating. This score, based on hundreds of critic reviews, indicates a deeply mixed consensus. The praise was often directed at the film's cast and its emotional core. Many critics highlighted Michael Keaton's triumphant return as a major highlight, praising his charismatic and world-weary performance. Sasha Calle's debut as Supergirl also received significant acclaim, with many critics noting her fierce and compelling screen presence. The central story of Barry's love for his mother and the emotional weight of his ultimate decision was also frequently cited as a strength. However, the negative critic reviews were pointed and focused on two major areas: the messy, overstuffed third act, and, most significantly, the film's controversial visual effects. The CGI became a major sticking point, with many critics calling it unconvincing, cartoonish, and at times, unsettling, particularly in the opening, falling babies sequence and the Chronobol cameos. This consistent criticism effectively killed any potential awards buzz for a visual effects nomination, as the film became a poster child for the perceived problems in the modern VFX industry. The end result was a film that critics found to have a strong heart but a flawed and visually unappealing body. Interestingly, this is a key part of our movie breakdown, where the critics and the public diverged. The audience scores for The Flash were significantly more positive. The film holds an 83% audience rating on Rotten Tomatoes, indicating that a vast majority of viewers who saw it enjoyed it. These much higher audience ratings can likely be attributed to the power of nostalgia and fan service. For many viewers, the sheer joy of seeing Michael Keaton back in the Batsuit, hearing Danny Elfman's score, and witnessing the multiverse of cameos was enough to overshadow the technical flaws. The audience scores suggest that as a piece of pure blockbuster entertainment, The Flash delivered for a large portion of its target demographic, even if it failed to win over the more discerning eye of professional critics. This stark divide between the critical and popular reception is a crucial part of the film's complex legacy. From an investor's standpoint, awards and critical acclaim are not just about prestige. They are tangible financial assets that can dramatically increase a film's value. The business of winning awards begins with the award campaign cost. A serious, for your consideration campaign, involving targeted ads in trade publications, private screenings for guild members, and lavish industry events, can cost a studio anywhere from $5 million to over $15 million for a single film. For The Flash, once the mixed reviews and disastrous box office numbers came in, Warner Bros. Likely made the swift and prudent financial decision to forego any significant award campaign cost, saving millions on what would have been a fruitless endeavor. This decision meant the film lost out on the chance to benefit from a powerful ROI multiplier. A major award nomination, and especially a win, can provide a significant post-award revenue boost. Key stat: A Best Picture Oscar win can provide a post-award revenue boost of an estimated $20 million to $50 million in additional domestic box office alone. This is a direct and powerful ROI multiplier that magnifies the return on the studio's initial investment. Even without a win, strong reviews act as a critical acclaim multiplier, increasing the film's long-term value. This is especially true in the age of streaming, where critical acclaim can justify prestige pricing in licensing deals. A film with a 95% on Rotten Tomatoes is a more valuable asset in a streaming library than one with a 63%. Because The Flash failed to achieve widespread acclaim, it lost this crucial critical acclaim multiplier, limiting its ability to generate significant streaming monetization and diminishing its overall legacy value as a library asset. That failure to win over critics and generate positive awards, buzz, has a direct impact on a film's long-term health in the public consciousness, which brings us to the volatile and often unpredictable world of pop culture. From meme references of its most iconic scene to viral fan clips that sparked massive social media reactions, The Flash's cultural impact rivals any competitor's pop culture influence, creating fan engagement that lives on through TikTok clips and Reddit theories. That, however, is the best-case scenario, the financial dream that studios hope for when they launch a 9-figure blockbuster. For The Flash, the actual cultural impact was far more complex and in many ways a reflection of its troubled production and divisive reception. Instead of generating a wave of purely positive viral moments, the film's most significant cultural footprint was carved out by debate and controversy. The most prominent example of this was the social media reaction to the film's visual effects. The opening sequence with the falling babies in the collapsing hospital became an instant source of memes and online ridicule. Viral fan clips of the scene, often accompanied by captions criticizing the uncanny, video game-like CGI, spread rapidly across Twitter and TikTok. This wasn't the kind of fan-driven content the studio wanted. It was negative buzz that actively harmed the film's reputation and likely discouraged potential ticket buyers. Similarly, the Chronobol cameos of deceased actors like Christopher Reeve sparked intense ethical debates online, with fan reactions split between those who saw it as a loving tribute and those who found it ghoulish and disrespectful. However, not all of the cultural impact was negative. The film did generate some genuinely positive viral moments, almost all of which were centered on the return of Michael Keaton. The fan quote, "You wanna get nuts. Let's get nuts," a direct callback to his 1989 film, became a celebrated and highly shared line. Fan art and social media posts celebrating his return were widespread, tapping into a deep well of nostalgia. This was the one area where the film's pop culture influence was unequivocally successful, proving the enduring power of that iconic portrayal of Batman. Furthermore, a huge driver of ongoing fan discussion comes from the film's dense layering of Easter eggs. For fans looking for Easter eggs explained, The Flash is a treasure trove. The most obvious, of course, is the final cameo by George Clooney, a metatextual joke referencing the much-maligned Batman and Robin. The Chronobol sequence itself is packed with cultural references, including the brief but significant appearance of Nicolas Cage as Superman. This is a deep cut for movie buffs, a behind-the-scenes nod to Tim Burton's famously canceled film, Superman Lives, from the late 1990s. Other fun facts include a blink-and-you'll-miss-it shot of the helmet of the Golden Age Flash, Jay Garrick, and even a quick glimpse of the classic 1960s Batmobile from the Adam West TV series. These carefully placed Easter eggs were designed to fuel Reddit theories and keep fans dissecting the film for weeks. A successful, if limited, strategy to maintain engagement. From a financial perspective, this kind of online buzz can be a goldmine, but only if the sentiment is positive. The goal is to achieve a high viral marketing ROI, where unpaid, fan-created content generates millions of dollars in free advertising. For The Flash, the mixed-to-negative buzz meant its viral marketing ROI was severely compromised. Instead of a purely positive revenue boost from cultural traction, the studio had to contend with a narrative of failure. This directly impacts the potential for a CPM uplift from engagement. When a film is trending for positive reasons, social media platforms can charge higher rates, CPMs, for ads placed around that content. Because The Flash's engagement was so controversial, it failed to create that premium ad environment, representing yet another significant missed revenue opportunity. That compromised cultural footprint, a mix of genuine fan excitement and widespread online ridicule, brings us to our final and most important chapter. The conclusion. What is the ultimate legacy of The Flash? What does its turbulent journey and shocking ending mean for the future of DC on screen? We've analyzed the budget, the box office, the story, and the buzz. Now, it's time to close the books and issue our final report. As The Flash cements its film legacy, with franchise potential that rivals any competitor's universe expansion, fans speculate on sequels and spin-off ideas, while the director's next projects and upcoming movies hint at a thrilling future. This, of course, is the grand narrative that was supposed to be. In the pristine, idealized franchise roadmap that existed on a whiteboard deep inside Warner Bros. Studios, The Flash was positioned as the most important DC film in a decade. It was designed to be the ultimate reset button, a narrative device so powerful that it could seamlessly close the door on the divisive Snyder era of films and gracefully open a new one for James Gunn and Peter Safran's forthcoming DC universe. The film's immense franchise potential was baked into its very premise. By introducing the multiverse, it gave the studio a plausible, in-universe explanation for recasting iconic characters and starting fresh without completely alienating the existing fanbase. The ending explained in our previous chapter, with the shocking arrival of George Clooney's Bruce Wayne, was the intended first step in this massive universe expansion. It was a bold cliffhanger designed to generate a year of intense fan anticipation and debate. In the wake of the film's release, fan forums and YouTube channels lit up with rumored plotlines and theories about potential sequels. The most popular and logical theory for The Flash 2 was the Flashpoint Beyond storyline. This would have seen Barry Allen, now trapped in this new, unfamiliar Clooneyverse, on a desperate quest to find his way back home. This premise offered limitless creative freedom. A sequel could have seen Barry hop through multiple universes, encountering different versions of DC heroes and villains along the way. It was the perfect vehicle to introduce the new actors for Superman, Batman, and other Justice League members, essentially turning the next Flash movie into a greatest hits tour of the new DCU. This approach would have leveraged the characters' unique abilities to serve the broader needs of the franchise roadmap, a clever and organic way to build a new world. Beyond direct sequels, the film was also a clear launchpad for several exciting spin-off ideas. The most obvious and highly anticipated of these was a solo film for Sasha Calle's Supergirl. Her performance was widely praised as a breakout, and her character's tragic backstory, a Kryptonian warrior, imprisoned and experimented on for years, left a rich narrative territory to explore. A Supergirl spin-off could have been a darker, more intense take on the Kryptonian mythos, a stark contrast to the more optimistic Superman stories. In fact, a Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow project was in early development, a testament to the studio's initial confidence in the character's franchise potential. Another of the most tantalizing spin-off ideas that gained traction was a Michael Keaton-led Batman project. Following his celebrated return, fans were clamoring to see more of his older, grizzled take on the character. Rumors swirled about a potential adaptation of the beloved Batman Beyond storyline, with Keaton stepping into the role of the elderly mentor to a new, younger Batman. The fan anticipation for such a project was immense, representing a guaranteed box office draw for an entire generation of moviegoers. However, our movie breakdown must ultimately pivot from the world of exciting what-ifs to the harsh world of what actually is. The catastrophic box office failure of The Flash was not just a financial loss. It was a stake through the heart of this entire planned universe expansion. The film that was meant to launch a dozen new ships ended up sinking the entire fleet. All talks of direct sequels and spin-off ideas were immediately shelved. Sasha Calle's Supergirl project was cancelled, and the Keaton-led Batman film was scrapped. The Clooney cameo, once intended as a shocking cliffhanger, now plays as an ironic, dead-end joke. The director, Andy Muschietti, has indeed moved on to his next projects. And in a strange twist of fate, he has been tasked with directing The Brave and the Bold, the Batman film that will be part of the new, completely rebooted DCU. So, in a way, Muschietti will get to help build the new DCU, but the bridge he built to get there has been burned to the ground. So, what is the final film legacy of The Flash? It will not be remembered as the triumphant start of a new era. Instead, it will be remembered as a high-profile, incredibly expensive, and definitive end of an old one. Its cinematic impact is that of a cautionary tale. It stands as a stark warning about the dangers of development hell, the immense risks of building a $250 million blockbuster around a controversial star, the perils of releasing a film with divisive and unfinished-looking visual effects, and the critical importance of having a clear, coherent creative vision. Its ultimate, ironic legacy is that it did, in fact, reset the DC universe, just not in the way it intended. It failed so spectacularly that it forced the studio to abandon any notion of a soft reboot and commit to a full, clean slate, hard reboot, wiping the entire board clean. The Flash did his job, but the cost was everything. From a long-term investor's perspective, the final chapter of any potential franchise is written in the cold, hard language of profit and loss, and the central metric is the long-term franchise ROI. A film like The Flash was never intended to be a standalone investment. It was what's known as a launch asset, a high-cost, high-risk product designed to generate a multi-billion-dollar revenue stream over the next decade. The ultimate goal was to dramatically increase the IP lifecycle value of the entire DC brand, turning it into a self-sustaining ecosystem of films, streaming shows, merchandise, and theme park attractions that could rival Marvel. The strategy was to use the film's narrative as a powerful ROI multiplier, where the success of this one film would create a halo effect, increasing the value and profitability of every subsequent project in the new DC universe. On paper, it was a sound, if ambitious, financial strategy. In reality, the film's failure represents one of the most significant destructions of potential value in modern Hollywood history. It didn't just fail to generate a positive long-term franchise ROI, it incinerated the very concept. The sequel investment risk for any project, even tangentially related to the characters or events of The Flash, is now, for all practical purposes, infinite. No rational studio would invest another $200 million in a direct sequel to a film that suffered such a catastrophic financial and reputational collapse. We can conservatively estimate that the failure of The Flash resulted in an immediate write-down of the DCEU's forward-looking IP lifecycle value by a staggering $2 to $4 billion. This isn't just about the loss on one film. It's about the obliteration of the cumulative revenue forecast for an entire slate of planned projects. The potential revenue from a Supergirl trilogy, a Keaton Batman film, and a Flash sequel trilogy A revenue stream that could have easily topped several $billion over 10 years vanished overnight. This collapse extends to all ancillary and legacy revenue streams. The potential for lucrative multi-picture deal ROI with rising stars like Sasha Calle was nullified, as her future in the role was cut short. This is a significant loss, as locking in talent at a favorable rate for multiple films is a cornerstone of franchise profitability. Furthermore, the steady, annuity-like income from legacy revenue streams like evergreen merchandise, ongoing comic book tie-ins, and licensing for video games will never materialize. A successful franchise starter creates decades of passive income. A failure like The Flash creates a financial dead zone. It became a toxic asset, an IP so damaged by its debut that it had to be completely quarantined and rebooted from scratch. Ultimately, the financial legacy of The Flash is a brutal case study in value destruction. Where a film like Iron Man served as an incredible ROI multiplier that exponentially increased the IP lifecycle value of the entire Marvel brand with each subsequent release, The Flash acted as a value divider. It took the existing, albeit troubled, IP valuation of the DC universe and fractured it, forcing a multi-billion-dollar course correction. The final balance sheet shows a colossal investment with a devastatingly negative return, not just in terms of production and marketing costs, but in the lost opportunity of what could have been. And that's the final, brutal balance sheet on the Flash A film that ran at the speed of light towards a new future, only to crash headfirst into a wall of financial reality. Join us next time on Screen Profits, where we follow the money. If you enjoyed this financial dissection, be sure to subscribe to Screen Profits. We are your definitive source for the most in-depth box office analysis and financial reports on modern hits. What last 10-year movie should we break down next? Let us know in the comments below, and we'll see you for the next financial report.